What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Goa-trance. This was a very energetic Luca, and we're returning for a tune from 1997, and I want to give a big shout out to Rene, Bypass Unit, who I reacted to. It was Tunnel Flotation, wasn't it? I think that's what it was. Yeah, and it was like the final 1997 remix. And in that, or in the aftermath of that reaction, Rene reached out, and we've been commenting or going back and forth a bit through email, and perhaps at some point there will be a more formal discussion. But in the meantime, I wanted to react to another Bypass Unit tune. And as far as I know, and again, my information here is never perfect, it's often based on what is available online or hearsay that I picked up over the years. But according to Discogs, this is the first Bypass Unit 12-inch EP on Tripomatic, or is it Tripomatic? Yeah, I think it's Tripomatic Records, which I believe is a Belgian label. I have another record by one of Push, or originally Dirk Derricks, right? But I think it's, since many years ago it's been Mike Derricks. But yes, most famously Push. I have a record of his under, is it like Return of the Native, I think is the name. But those are the only Tripomatic records I have. As I said, I think it's a Belgian label. This is from 1997, and according to the information here, and Rene, correct me if this is not accurate, but this is at a point when Bypass Unit was 3 people, or at the very least 3 people were involved in this particular release. Now, it's listed as the Higher Spirituality EP, and that is indeed the track on the A-side, and that is a good tune, but I actually think this is one of those records where the B-side actually goes to an even higher level, and the B-side is a track called Cruiser, and it just honestly has that 90s Goa-trance feel to it. It's got drive, it's got acid, it's got mystery, it's got a bit of intensity along the way, so yes, I think it is a very reflective tune of 90s Goa-trance. You are ridiculous, Luca, you know that? So let's give it a listen. This is Bypass Unit. The track is Cruiser, and it's from the Higher Spirituality EP on Tripomatic Records, 1997. timing, Luca. Yeah, so it's just classic Goa. I do feel like you can hear, and this is maybe something that is more discernible in retrospect, but I often talk about 90s Goa, like even more narrowly, like 90s acid Goa, because a lot of the best Goa in the 90s had a very heavy acid component, and definitely there's a, flourishing bit of acidic layer in this tune. But over time, it's like you can hear the difference between like a 94, 95 Goa tune and like a 97 or a 98 Goa tune. And some of the reasons my brain sees those distinctions would be hard to articulate verbally. I will say something about the drive of the tune, something about the way the melody plays out. But basically, it sounds like a track that you could mix with a later Cosmosis tune after they split into was like Bill still as Cosmosis, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, but he became Laughing Buddha. But this sounds like the kind of tune you could mix with a Cosmosis track or with like a later 90s, even like early 2000s astral projection tunes. So again, these aren't thoughts I may have had in 97 or 98 when I was going to parties and getting into Goa-trance and acid trance, acid techno, and so on. But in retrospect, I can hear how this is from the second half of the 90s, just in terms of some of the styling, some of the sound. In any case, I really do like the mystery of the tune. I also was not remembering, but enjoyed that section where the bass line dropped down really low and it got like a really heavy, like subterranean type of feel, and then eventually it rose back out of that again. So that was a cool moment that I was not recalling. And yeah, I like the way it starts. There's a lot of ambience, a lot of atmosphere. Then the kick drum sort of works its way into the track. Then the hi-hat works its way into the track. I do enjoy that first major breakdown because, again, there's a lot of electric energy just vibrating and pulsing, and the drop is coming. But one of the cool things about Goa-trance, especially sort of like, vintage Goa, and to be clear, I like later Psytrance too, I like Psy and Goa, but they're kind of different beasts. They're like in the same universe, but they're in very different galaxies. And what I like about old school Goa is the breakdowns are unpredictable. Like the breakdown build up and drops, they're unpredictable. Whereas like Psytrance, and again, this is not really a knock, but those, big snare roll build up and drops, they're more predictable. Now, as a DJ, that's not a bad thing. It, allows you to maybe engage in some beat juggling and so on, like while you're waiting for the big build up. But old school Goa, especially the first time you hear a tune, sometimes you're kind of in this limbo and you don't know when a build up and a drop is coming, and there might be a little snare roll flare, but then it might dissipate, and then it might come back, and it might come back around again, and the whole time you're like, when is it going to drop? You don't know. And so I enjoy the way that first major breakdown of this one plays out and the way it comes back. So yeah, it's classic. It's a great 90s tune. Once again, big shout out to Rene. More on that coming in the future, hopefully. I will come and react to not only the other side. What am I looking at? There's something in this sleeve. What is this? That's a Tripomatic, like, mailer. Yeah, mailing list. Well, I'm probably a little late to reply to this. What Tripomatic releases have you bought? Well, I already talked about that in this release. I have another one by, again, I think one of Mike Derrick's aliases, most famously known as Push. But yeah, I think it's like Return of the Native. Where did I buy it? Is there a clear sleeve here, or a sticker on the sleeve? Sometimes the record stores I bought stuff from would have a sticker, like the Vinyl Fetish records I have, but nope, no sticker, so I'm not sure about that. What magazines do you read? Well, these days, most of the stuff I read is online. I never really got into, there was like Mix Mag, and there was like a lot of different DJ-oriented magazines back in the day, but I was mainly just going to record shops and I'd start flipping through the stacks. And then after a while, when you do that, you start following certain labels, certain artists, and at some of the record shops I went to, there were other DJs who work there, and you get to know them, and then you go in and like, hey man, you should check this out. There's a new release, in this style that you like. And so I'd get like, sort of things set aside by some of my DJ friends who worked at some of these shops. What does this say? What parties, clubs do you go to? Well, again, that is. I mean, this would have been very interesting to fill out and send back. But yeah, I went to mainly like one-off parties, although some production crews would put on multiple series, including, the party crew that I got my DJ start with. I played probably, I don't know, 8, something like that, parties for Something Fresh, which is usually like one room of trance and one room of house, sometimes with, breaks in the house room, or, like a techno set in the trance room. But by and large, I didn't go to clubs. There was a really cool, like, rave-oriented club in LA. It was called Magic. And that one, again, had, like, I think it was Magic Wednesdays specifically, and it had trance, sometimes, like, happy hardcore and, like, things that were a bit more off the beaten path. But I remember some friends of mine went to that. And then, again, there were some, like, regular events, like Hard to the Core, one room hardcore, one room drum and bass. But it wasn't like a club. It was, like, once every 2 or 3 months they do a show, and like, so over the course of a year there'd be like 6 or 7 Hard to the Cores. And what are your favorite styles of music? Well, we need like 10 hours to talk about that, but no, in all seriousness, I suppose you could look around on my channel and see all the different styles of music I listen to, and a lot of them go back to these days. But yeah, that was cool. I didn't remember this was in here, and obviously, I wasn't aware when I bought the record that it was in here. So, yeah, big shout out once again to Rene, Bypass Unit, more tracks, more reactions coming. I think I only reacted to that one on the Tunnel Flotation EP, and there's the title track on this EP, so at least a few more. And yeah, I will see you for those. And from the Grooming Luca and I, let me know what you think. Peace.